Rachel Moore stood outside her old apartment 7 years ago, the key still in her hand, the door locked tight behind her. She'd walked away from Ghost Viper, a covert spec ops unit that didn't exist on any government ledger, leaving behind a life that was nothing but whispers and shadows. Her last mission left a thin scar on her left wrist, a faint line she could still feel when the air turned chilly. She slipped a faded photo of her team into her canvas backpack, their faces smudged by time and a coffee stain, and swore she'd never touch a weapon again. That promise weighed heavy like a rock in her chest. But life has a way of breaking promises when you least expect it. On a sticky Tuesday morning in a small Virginia town, Rachel pushed open the door of Alpha Range, a gun shop, thick with the smell of gunpowder and machine oil. Her gray windbreaker hung loose, her jeans were wrinkled and her sneakers were peeling at the soles. Her black hair fell past her shoulders, unbrushed, framing a face with no makeup, just sharp, quiet eyes that seemed to see everything. The bell above the door clanged, and the room turned to stare. 3 young men browsing rifles burst out laughing. "The bubble tea shops across the street, lady." One of them called, his voice sharp with mockery. Another clerk jerried, "This cosplay place. You hear a selfie with a Glock?" Rachel didn't reply. She lowered her head, inspected the Glock on the counter, and assassinated the entire gun in 4 seconds, one-handed. The entire room went dead silent because of that maneuver was only taught inside. On it, the Department of Defense erased in 2014. The shop felt like it was holding its breath, the air thick and heavy. The 3 guys, college types with slick hair and overpriced sneakers, froze, their laughs cut short like someone had pulled a plug. The loud one with the silver watch that caught the fluorescent light leaned forward, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Okay, princess, you got some moves, but this ain't a toy store." His friend snickered, but it was nervous now, like they weren't sure what they were seeing. Rachel didn't look up. She ran her fingers along the counter, her eye scanning the glass case of semi-automatic pistols like she was picking out bread at a market. She pointed at a Glock 19, her gesture combat precise. "I'd like to try this one," she said, her voice soft, like she was asking for directions. The clerk, Tyler, a scrawny guy with a patchy beard and anime tag half peeled off, smirked. "What are you looking for? Or are you just there to selfie?" A customer sipping coffee from a to-go cup chimed in, his voice loud and mean. "Try it and count cops when it falls on her foot." Therum chuckled, the sound sharp and cruel, like they were all waiting for her to trip over her own sneakers. A woman in a bright yellow sundress, her earrings dangling like tiny chandeliers, stood near the magazine rack, flipping through a catalog. She looked up, her lips curling into a fake sweet smile. "Oh honey," she said, her voice loud enough to draw eyes. "You must be lost. This place is for serious people, not whatever you're doing." The crowd tittered. Some nodded. Others glancing away like they didn't want to be caught staring. Rachel's hand paused on the Glock, her fingers brushing the grip like she was testing its balance. She turned her head just enough to meet the woman's gaze, her eyes steady, unblinking. The woman's smile faltered, her earrings weighing as she shifted uncomfortably. Rachel didn't speak. She picked up the Glock again, her movements smooth like she was pouring water. She checked the safety, removed the slide barrel and recoil spring flawlessly in 4 seconds. She set the parts down, each one clicking softly, and said, still off Bizarro. 4M, the woman's catalog slipped from her hands, landing with a soft thud in the floor. "Before we go on, if ice is hitting you, maybe you've been laughed at. Maybe you've been judged for just existing in a place you're not supposed to be. Take a second, grab your phone, hit that like button, drop a comment about where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel. It's just a small way to connect, to say you're here with us feeling this moment. Your support keeps these stories alive, keeps us walking through the pain and the truth together." The silence after Rachel's second disassembly was thick, like the room was under a spell. Tyler's smirk faltered, but he wasn't ready to back down. He leaned over the counter, his fingers tapping nervously. "All right, hot shot," he said, his voice louder than it needed to be. "That was cute. Let's see you do it again. Or was that just a fluke? The college guy slawed, their confidence creeping back, though it sounded thin like they were trying to drown out their own doubts. The one with the silver watch whose namatag read, Josh grinned. What you going to start a YouTube channel now? Gun girl. The room snickered. The sound jagged like broken glass. Rachel didn't flinch. She picked up the Glock 19 again, her hands moving with a quiet grace like she was folding a letter. Sheck hecked the safety removed the slide barrel and recoil spring flawlessly, steadily without a single wasted motion. 4 seconds later, the gun lay in 6 neat parts on the counter. She examined the barrel, set it down gently, and said, "The bore is off-center by 04M. The laughter stopped. A customer knurred back. An older guy with a gray ponytail and a faded army jacket whispered to his friend, "I've seen Navy SEALs do that, but not a messy-haired girl with a worn-out bag." A man in a crisp polo, his sunglasses perched on his head like a crown, stood by the holster display, his arms crossed. He stepped forward, his voice smooth, but cutting like a knife wrapped in silk. "Look, sweetheart, this isn't your playground," he said, eyeing Rachel's windbreak. The zipper stuck halfway. "You're wasting our time with this little show. Go back to wherever you're from." The room murmured, some chuckling, others shifting uncomfortably, like they weren't whether to join in or stay quiet. Rachel didn't look at him. She reached for a cleaning cloth on the counter, wiping the Glock slide with slow, deliberate strokes like she was erasing his words. The man's sunglasses slipped as he leaned closer, his voice rising. "What? You think you're some kind of pro? Get out of here." Rachel folded the cloth, set it down, and said, "I'm here for what I need. Nothing more." The words were quiet, but they hit like a closed fist, firm and final. The man's face twitched, his sunglasses now unhinged, his confidence unraveling. The air in the shop was thick now, like a moment before a storm breaks. Tyler's face tightened, but he wasn't done. He gestured toward the range door, a heavy steel slab with chipped paint. "Okay, fine," he said, his voice loud, like he needed to take charge again. "You know how to take a gun apart. Doesn't mean you can shoot." A custom-mernamed Brad, decked out in military camo with a crew cut that screamed wannabe soldier, stepped forward, tossing an old Colt onto the counter. "5 rounds. Miss once and you leave," he said, his voice hard like he was laying down a law. The crowd gathered, their footsteps scuffing the linoleum. Someone in the back laughed. "Miss Ansh's mopping floors." Rachel intrigued. She picked up the Colt, unloaded the mag, checked each bullet with a quick glance, and reloaded it, her hands moving like they'd done this in the dark under pressure 1,000 times. She headed for the range, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her step steady but quiet like she was walking into a memory. A woman in a knitted sweater, her glasses perched on the tip of her nose, stood near the ammo shelves, her hands clutching a shopping bag. She spoke up, her voice sharp and accusing. "You're just making a scene," she said, pointing at Rachel's sneakers, the lace frayed, and nodded. "You come in here looking like that, acting like you belong. You're embarrassing yourself." The crowd stirred, some laughing, others nodding like she'd said what they were thinking. Rachel paused at the range door, her hand on the handle, and turned slightly, just enough to meet the woman's ease. She didn't speak. She adjusted her backpack, the canvas catching on her windbreaker, and pushed the door open. The steel creaked, and the crowd followed, their whispers buzzing like static, eager to see her fail. The woman in the sweater adjusted her glasses, her bag crinkling as she gripped it tighter, but her eyes lingered on Rachel's back like she was searching for a crack in her calm. Inside the range, Rachel stood at the firing line, her feet square, iris narrowing as she studied the target 20 out. A worn silhouette already appeared with holes. Brad leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, his smirk wide. "Let's see it, princess," he called loud enough for everyone to hear. A teenage boy in a hoodie, his earbuds dangling, pulled out his phone, zooming in his friend, whispering, "She's going to choke." Rachel adjusted her stance, her shoulders relaxed, her hand steady as she raised the Colt. The room went quiet. the only sound the faint hum off ventilation. She took a breath, slow and even, and fired. First round dead center. Second pierced the first. Third, no new hole. Fourth and fifth, somersault. All through one perfect point. The target tearing open like a pinwheel. The kind of shot only seen in special forces drills. The room froze. Brad's arms dropped. His smirk gone. Tyler stammered. "Have you competed for?" Rachel set the Colt down, her movements calm, and said, "I trained the people who did." A man in a worn leather jacket, his beard flecked with gray, stood near the range exit, his hands stuffed in his pockets. He spoke up, his voice rough and skeptical. "That's a lucky shot," he said, gesturing at Thetterget. "Doesn't prove anything. You're just showing off for the crowd." The crowd murmured, some nodded, others shifting uncomfortably, like they weren't what to believe. Rachel didn't look at him. She reached for a pair of ear protectors on the wall, checking them with a quick glance before setting them down. Her fingers moved with the same precision she'd shown with the Colt. Like every action was a reflex burned into her bones. The man in the leather jacket pressed on, his voice louder. "Come on, admit it. You're just here for attention." Rachel turned slightly, her eyes meeting his, and said, "I don't need your approval." The words were soft, but they cut through the room sharp and final. The man's hands came out of his pockets. His face flushing ash, looked away. The shop was buzzing now, the air heavy with tension. An older man near the range door, his face aligned with years of sun and smoke, spoke up, his voice gruff. "I saw that shooting pattern once," he said, his eyes fixed on Rakel. "Syria 2010. Only one unit could do that." His words hung in the air like a question none dared answer. The crowd shifted their eyes, darting between Rachel and the target, like they were trying to make a sense of it. Tyler shook his head, his voice sharp. "Without a permit, you're still a civilian." "Nobody," he called forward, his hands fidgeting on the counter. Rachel reached into her backpack, pulled out an old personal ID. No firearm license, just a faded card with her name and a photo that looked like it was taken on a bad day. Brad scoffed loud and mean. "No military record, no permit. Just another wannabe." The kid with the hoodie laughed, his voice carrying TikTok girl. "Fake assassin vibes for views." Rachel's gaze turned colder, her fingers tightening slightly on the ID before she tucked it away. A woman in a tailored blazer, her hair pulled into a sleek ponytail, stepped forward from the AMA display, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice crisp like she was used to being obeyed. "You're wasting Gavrion's time with this act. You think you can just walk in here and play hero?" The room murmured, some nodding, others looking down like they didn't want to be caught in the crossfire. Rachel didn't respond. She reached into her backpack, pulling out a small, worn-out book, its pages crinkled and edge-frayed. She flipped it open, scanned a page, and tucked it away. Her movements, calm but deliberate, like she was checking a list she had memorized years ago. The woman in the blazer pressed on, her voice rising. "What? You got some secret manual in there? Stop pretending." Rachel closed her backpack, her fingers brushing the zipper, and said, "I'm not pretending." The words were quiet, but they carried a weight that made the woman's heels stop clicking, her ponytail swaying slightly as she stepped back. The bell above the door clanged sharp and sudden, and the room turned. Two men in gray suits stepped in together, faces blank as their movements crisped, like they'd been trained to move without being seen. They didn't glance at Tyler or Brad or the kid with the hoodie. They walked straight to Rachel, stood at attention, and one of them handed her a sealed dossier. "Emergency. Recall situation code Sable 9. He said, his voice low but clear like a radio transmission. The room froze. A customer in the back gasped. "That's a national level activation code." Rachel flipped through the file, her eye scanning the pages, and nodded. She turned to Tyler, her voice calm. "No need to buy a gun. I'll be issued gear at Thefferward Post." Brad backed away, his face pale, his voice barely a whisper. "You're a Raven." Rachel looked at him, her eye steady, and said, "I used to be." A man in a flannel shirt, his glasses fogged from the heat, stood near the counter, his hands fidgeting with the keychain. "He spoke up, his voice shaking with indignation. "You're just trying to make us look stupid," he said, pointing at Raquel's backpack. The canvas patched and fraying. "You come in here looking like that, acting like you're better than us. What's your deal?" The room stirred some laughing others, nodding like he'd said what they were thinking. Rachel didn't look at him. She adjusted the straps of her backpack, her fingers moving with the same precision she'd shown with the Glock. Like every action was a reflex. The man in flannel pressed on, his voice louder. "You think you can just walk in here and humiliate us?" Rachel paused, her hand resting on the dossier, and said, "I'm not here to humiliate anyone." The words were soft, but they hit like a quiet thunderclap, leaving the man blinking, his kitchen jingling as his hands dropped. A woman at the counter, her hair pulled into a tight bun, her purse clutched like a shield, spoke up, her voice sharp and accusing. "If you're such a badass, why dress like a homeless person?" she said, gesturing at Rachel's windbreaker, her jeans, her sneakers. "I find people like you dangerous, hiding knives and cupcakes." The room stirred, some laughing others looking down like they didn't want to be caught in the crossfire. Rachel set her backpack on the counter, unzipped it, and pulled out a left eye patch, placing it next to the ammo. She looked at the woman, her gaze calm but piercing, and said, "No one needs to remember me. I just need to remember Thetterget." The words were quiet, but they landed like a hammer, heavy and final. Brad's face went white, his voice aching. "You're the one who saved Bravotium at Yaren, aren't you?" Rachel didn't answer. She slung her backpack over her shoulder, her movement slow, deliberate, like she was carrying more than just ammo. A young clerk, barely out of his teens, stood behind the counter, his hands fumbling with a stack of forms. He'd been quiet, but now he spoke, his voice cracking with nerves. "Come on, lady. You're making us look bad." Hesade, trying to sound tough, but failing. "Just admit you're faking it and go." The room murmured, some laughing others, nodding like he'd hit the nail in the head. Rachel turned to him, her eyes steady, and picked up a single bullet from the counter. She held it between her fingers, rolling it slowly, letting the light catch its brass casing. "This isn't about you," she said, her voice low but clear, like she was speaking to him alone. The clerk's hands froze on the forms. His face paling. Ash realized she had turned his challenge back on him without raising her voice. The older man with the ponytail nodded slowly like he was piecing something together, his coffee forgotten on the counter. A man in a denim jacket, his hair slicked back with too much gel, stood near the exit, his arms crossed. He spoke now, his voice loud and bitter. "This is some kind of setup, right?" Hesade, pointing at Rachel's sneakers, Thiesel's flapping loose. "You come in here looking like that, acting like you're better than us. What's your game?" Therum stirred, some nodding, others looking away like they didn't want to be part of it, but couldn't resist. Rachel paused to her hand on the dossier and turned slightly, just enough to meet his eyes. She didn't raise her voice, didn't step closer. She just said, "I'm here to do what I need to do." The words were simple, but they hit like a punch. Quiet and sure. The man in denim blinked his arms, dropping his bravado, crumbling like dry dirt. The suit stood by Theodore, their presence heavy, waiting for a call to finish. The store of liquored, cutting through the silence with a low hum. An emergency alert flashed across the screen. The word stark and red. Raven Rachel Murray activated under red order classifiable. The room went still, the air heavy with the weight of it. One of the agents bowed slightly to Rachel, his voice low. "Welcome back." She turned, her sharp eyes locking with Brad Tyler and the rest off shop. Her gaze steady, unflinching. "An hour ago you didn't see me," she said, her voice calm but heavy, like a stone sinking into deep water. "Good. Don't ever see me again." She stepped into the waiting black SUV, the door closing with a soft thud, her backpack still slung over her shoulder. The crowd stood frozen, their faces a mix of shock and shame, like they just realized they had been shouting at a ghost. A woman in a plaid scarf, her hands clutching a thermos, stood near the counter, her eyes narrow. She spoke now, her voice sharp and accusing. "You think you can just walk in here and act like you own the place?" she said, gesturing at Raquel's windbreaker, the zipper catching as she moved. "People like you don't belong here." The room stirred, some nodding, others looking away like they didn't want to be caught in that crossfire. Rachel paused, her hand on the sub's door, and turned slightly just enough to meet the woman's eyes. She didn't raise her voice, didn't step closer. She just said, "I'm here for the same reason you are, to get what I need and leave." The woman's hands tightened in her thermos, the plastic creaking. Ash looked down, her face flushed. Thejits followed Rachel into the SUV, their steps silent, their presence like a shadow that swallowed the room's light. The shop stayed quiet, but not for long. Within minutes, every surveillance camera on the block went dark. 15 minutes of nothing under an emergency order from Washington. The SUV vanished into an unmarked zone, leaving the town buzzing with whispers like a storm had passed through. Leaks started trickling out. Raven, the close quarters combat instructor from Ghost Viper, had resurfaced. Tyler rewatched the shop security footage, his hands shaking as he clicked through the frames. But the part showing Grackle was gone, erased like she'd never stood there, never touched the Glock, never fired the Colt. All that remained was the target on the range wall. 5 perfect bullet holes untouched, like a signature no one dared erase. The regulars would walk by it, their voice low, their eyes lingering, like they were looking at something holy. A week later, a local reporter slipped into the shop, his notebook open, his pen scratching furiously. He'd heard the rumors, caught wind of a woman who'd silenced a room full of skeptics. He asked Tyler about her, about the target, about the suits. Tyler's face closed up, his hands fidgeting with the rag as he wiped the counter. "Don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice flat, but his ears darted to the range door. Their porter pressed, mentioning Yaren, Ghost Viper, Sable 9. The older man with ponytail sitting in the corner with a coffee looked up, his hands tightening around his cup. "She was here," he said, his voice low but sure, "and she was real." Tyler cut him off, saying the shop had no comment, but Thedergett stayed. On the wall, a silent witness to a truth no one could erase. The fallout came fast, and it wasn't gentle. Josh, the guy with the silver watch, posted a shaky video on Linetrine to laugh off the day that his was high and nervous as he recounted the story to his followers. It backfired. The comments tore him apart, calling him out for mocking a hero, for thinking his watch, and his smirk made him untouchable. His sponsorship with the local car dealership got yanked within days. The company citing brand misalignment. Brad was let go from his security job after his boss saw the footage. His style guy act didn't sit well when the truth about Rachel started spreading. Tyler didn't lose his job, but he stopped talking about that day. Hishans flinching whenever Sumiona mentioned the Glock or the Colt, like Thiemery Burn. The woman in the yellow sundress lost her spot on a local charity board after her comments were quoted in a viral post. Her earrings no longer a point of pride. The woman in the knitted sweater stopped showing up at the shop, her glasses and hair accusations fading from memory. The kid with the hoodie deleted his social media after his video got flooded with comments calling him out for mocking Zumion he'd never understand. The man in the leather jacket stayed away, his absence noted by the regulars who'd heard his bitter words. The alderman from Syria wrote a letter to the local paper, his handwriting shaky but clear, telling his story of that night in 2010, how a woman with Rachel's face had saved his unit. It never got published, but he kept a copy folded in his wallet next to a photo of his daughter, her smile bright against the worn paper. Rachel didn't see any of it. She was gone, pulled back into a world that didn't exist on paper, a world often marked zones and orders that came in sealed doses. The shop stayed quiet for weeks, the air heavy with what they'd all witnessed. People would walk by the range, glancing at the target still hanging on the wall, and lower their voices like they were in a church. The 5 bullet holes were reminder not of anger, not of revenge, but of someone who didn't need to shoot or be heard. Rachel didn't gloat, she didn't turn back to rub it in. She just kept walking, her sneakers kicking up dust on a road no one else could see. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was power. It was the kind of strength that don't need a spotlight, because it changes the room just by being there. For everyone who's ever been looked down in, who's felt the sting of a stranger's slaw, who's carried their truth insolence, Rachel's story wasn't just theirs. It was theirs. It was proof that you don't need to scream to be seen. Sometimes you just need to stand steady and quiet and let the world catch up. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.